Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast. I'm Shannon Jackson, former anxiety sufferer turned adventure mom and anxiety recovery coach. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. And now I help people to push past the stuff that I used to struggle with. Each week, I'll be sharing real and honest conversations along with actionable and practical steps that you can take to help you push past your anxious thoughts, the symptoms, panic, and fears. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Welcome, Kathryn, to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here today. So for those listening, Kathryn was a one-on-one client of mine, and we worked together for a little bit. And her story is just amazing. And Kathryn's amazing. And I am just so excited to share her with you and for her to give you some insights and just encouragement. And this conversation is going to be amazing. So welcome, Kathryn. I am so happy to have you here. Can you just tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for welcoming me to the podcast. I've been looking forward to it. Took a little while for us to be able to get the calendar right, but my name is Kathryn, as you all know, with a K and an RYN. So don't misspell it in your mind while you're listening to this. I live in Ohio, and I am a single woman, and I actually have my own business called Kathryn Barber Creative. And I am that person who sits behind a screen all day and tries to breathe life into people's business ideas and all sorts of good stuff like that. So it keeps me very busy.
I love it. I love it. It's so cool. So let's dive in because I am so excited for you to share. Like when you first came to me, like when you finally reached out and you were like, all right, Shannon, I need to and want to do some coaching. Can you talk me through really what brought you to me and like why you made that decision?
Oh my. Well, I will say from the top that I came to you ashamed and embarrassed of these issues, of these, even that sort of label of somebody who has panic or anxiety, or the agoraphobia label is just so like, it feels sometimes degrading a bit. And so there is some shame and embarrassment attached to it. And so that was basically the state that I came to you in. And I, I had been, I guess I have to go backwards a little bit to get up to that point. And it might tell the story a little bit better, as these things started to happen, these issues, I would say, started to happen in 2014, 2015. I started to kind of go back in my mind of, okay, so now I'm feeling these certain things, which I'll touch on, but I considered myself a world traveler. I had been to London, I had been to Paris, I had, in high school and college, I had spent my summers in Guatemala, serving in youth mission. And I was in the fashion industry. So I had a career before that in the fashion industry. And an interesting part of my story is I had been living in New York and I got transferred to Seattle. And I moved to Seattle without ever having been to Seattle. I shipped my car, I shipped boxes, I got on a plane, which, yeah, I did. And I flew to Seattle, and I hadn't even seen my house yet. Like, I just did everything online, so kind of just the whole carefree. I had not a care in the world. I was very fly by the seat of your pants, kind of spontaneous type of girl. I was never controlling of my environment. Let's put it that way. So that was kind of who I was before 2014. My whole life, I was that girl. And in 2014, I was getting ready to be married. Was traveling up to Canada. I was going to be actually moving to Canada. Long story short, I had an 8-hour interrogation at the border. So even though we had, done all of our legal stuff and our paperwork and all of that, just so everybody knows I'm not a criminal. Something stopped, there just was something that they figured out. And by the way, I love Canada. If we have any Canadian border patrol listening, you guys are awesome. On this particular day, though, here I was the girl who'd never had a speeding ticket, who spent 8 hours basically like in a holding cell at the border. And talk about reliving that memory. Like I can feel the adrenaline still bubble up. And that was 7 years ago? No, more than that. Almost 8 years ago, right? And so I got turned away at the border. And that, even though in that moment I had no issues, I was happy-go-lucky Kathryn. I could take on the world. Okay, got turned away at the border. Let's figure out another plan, which we did. Ended up getting married. And within about 6 months of that happening and getting married, I started to feel like I wanted to stay close to home. Like that was the first thing of, that feels like a long way to go. I really wanted to feel like I really felt like I needed to stay close to home. And again, I was not putting the pieces together at that point. And the hard part is that not wanting to travel was so very much unlike me. I had just moved from I grew up in Ohio. I've lived in Dallas and New York and Seattle and all these places. So it was a very awkward for me to feel that way. And but it crept on very, I really didn't even question it. I think that, I just had a fear of being away from home. And then it started to be, I was afraid to be in the car. Now, I will say my border crossing experience was in a car. Okay. But even sitting in a car in the driveway, I couldn't do it. And so like it just was really interesting how it was like within 6 months, I was a completely different girl. Completely different. And I think about the fact that like this is so hard to even admit, but like I had safe places on my couch. Like I had to sit in one certain space on my couch to feel safe. And again, all I'm thinking in my mind is I'm feeling ashamed and embarrassed because I'm like, everybody knows bubbly Kathryn. Everybody knows Kathryn who would jump on a plane from New York to Seattle to move there, take on a new job and all of those things, right? And now I can't even get in a car. So that was, those were really the first, I would say, issues or symptoms or whatever you want to call them, right?
Yeah.
So my first, do you want me to talk about my first panic attack?
Yeah. I would love to hear that.
Okay. So the first one that I had behind the wheel was after like kind of 6 months staying close to home. I kind of had this like 2 to 3 mile radius of safety. How does that safety zone get created? You think about it. You think, why was this street unsafe, but this street was safe? But it was a clear, kind of marked boundary of 2 to 3 miles. And I had to go renew my driver's license. And was that within the 2 to 3 miles of safety zone. No, it was not. It was actually a half a mile beyond that. In my home state of Ohio, you have 6 months past your birth date to renew, and I was like 2 days out. Like I had waited the whole 6 months. So I knew that I had put it off and put it off, and I was within days of it expiring, and I it, like I said, it was kind of like a half mile beyond the boundary, and I started to drive. Now I had mapped out a route that did not have any scary red lights that I would get trapped in.
Right.
It was through through a neighborhood, so I wouldn't get trapped. And it honestly would have taken me like 3.5 minutes to get there. Right. And how sad is it that I feel embarrassed even now saying that? Like
Mm.
it creates this shame inside you. And that was the first time that I started to feel lightheaded, the dizzy, like the impending doom. Like I thought to myself, am I having a nervous breakdown? Like what is happening to me? I'm a relatively healthy 40-year-old woman. And I thought that I was having a nervous breakdown. I pulled into a driveway. My legs were shaking so hard that I couldn't even barely press down on the pedal. And I thought, okay, I can't do this. I can't do it. So I started to go back towards home. And wouldn't you know it, that the closer I got to home, the feelings lifted.
Yeah. Funny how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, it is so interesting how that happens. How when the monster's kind of circling your car, trying to get you to look it in the eye. And if you go beyond what it feels like is, where it can't get to you, or you stay within it, it's like the monster's the border of the safe zone. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime you try to cross it, he's circling your car, he, she, whatever it is, and trying to look you in the eye and trying to get you to turn around. Don't go fast. Don't go past here. It's doom and gloom. So I went back home and I pulled in my driveway, and I had the after effects of the panic attack, but I, didn't feel like I was dying because I was back in my driveway, and now I will say that um, in my marriage as well, it was not we were now several years in, and it was not a good environment. So I had a lot of stress within the home as well, and so that kind of layered into it. And when I drove home from that panic attack, I did not leave the house for a year after that.
Mm.
Kathryn, spunky Kathryn, did not leave her house for an entire year. And that wasn't actually really that helpful. Put aside the panic attack and the agoraphobia kind of things that had started to happen over that past year, but the home life itself was very toxic. So that just, put me kind of in this box of living and breathing, but not really living and breathing.
Yeah.
Right. I was ashamed. There were days where I could barely walk to the end of my driveway without panicking. To the end of my driveway.
Mm.
And I lived in a neighborhood. Our driveways are short, So at that point, I was trying several types of things like pep talks. I have a strong faith, and so I was begging and pleading for a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is not me. I'm Seattle Kathryn. I'm New York Kathryn. I'm South America Kathryn. I'm Paris Marathon Kathryn. I'm not Kathryn who can't walk to the end of their driveway without, panicking. But it got worse and worse, and, kind of coinciding with the unhealthy situation, inside my home, which was really bad. So now we're into early 2020, and it's interesting because I feel like in early 2020, this is good. I don't even know how this is going to come across, Shannon, but I felt like I was basically buried alive in a coffin. I couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck in one place. And, there were days where I could maybe walk down to the end of my driveway and then 2 or 3 houses down. But I would start to panic, so I would go back. And, I just thought to myself, like, I was so hopeless. I thought, I'm going to die here. And I'm just 40 years old, and I don't have anything physically wrong with me. There's nothing
Mm.
wrong with my legs. There's nothing wrong with my heart. I'm in shape. Um, but I just thought that that I was gonna, basically that I was gonna die in that spot. So in May of 2020, I have a younger sister. She is 25 years younger than me.
Wow.
And so she was in college while I was going through this, which was really tough because she's like, come to my sorority parties and, do all the things. And I couldn't. And she knew a little bit about what I was going through, but at that point I had told no one. Like
Mm.
nobody knew. I hid it. There are so many creative ways that we hide this.
Endless.
Never considered myself a liar until now. Like all the creative ways that we hide it. But she was in college and she was in nursing school. So I felt safe with her physically. And that's another layer of, you talk about that safe person. And so we kind of, the safe person being your mom at the time. And I felt safe with her physically, even though she didn't really know what I was going through. But I thought, well, if I fainted or my heart burst out of my chest, because that happens every day, that, she would be able to help me. So I asked her if she would pick me up. Now, I've been in a house for a year, like barely able to even walk 2 or 3 houses down. But I just got to the point of that, what I just talked about, that sort of coffin feeling, that I
Mm.
thought, I'm either going to die here or I'm going to die trying. So I need to try. And I convinced her to pick me up. We drove 2 hours south to my family's, to my mom's. I had not been in a car or gone far in over a year, in a year. Um, but again, I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I'm not going to survive how I am
Mm.
with the home life and all. I'm like, I'm just going to not survive. So what's the worst that can happen? And I think sometimes we have to get to that point of there's no more choices. There's no more things that we've removed the car. We've removed going outside. We've removed sitting on that space on the couch that's unsafe. I was spending all my time in a back bedroom that I had set up as an office with a couch. And that's where I spent. Not only was I in the house, but I was in that room. And I felt like a freak. Like I felt like there's nobody I honestly at that point had no idea that there was anybody else out there that felt this way.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, like, I am the strangest person alive. Like, I've never even considered that there was a group of people out here dealing with this. So, obviously I premeditated the doom and gloom that would happen on this drive 2 hours. And, you know, it's interesting. So, this is the piece that you speak to a lot. The action of it, while it was not comfortable, the doom and gloom wasn't happening either. So you almost then translated into this euphoria of, okay, I'm driving in a car and I'm an hour from my safe place and I'm an hour from my destination. And the doom and gloom isn't happening. Do I feel comfortable? No, I feel a little nauseous. I probably wouldn't want to, eat greasy French fries and a milkshake from gas right now. Wouldn't go well. But the doom and gloom, I'm going to die on the way, or my heart's going to fall out of my chest, or all of those things we convince ourselves, was not happening. Um, so, the hardest part, I think, is when we're in the middle.
Yeah, no turning around. I have to go forward.
Yeah, I got to keep going, but I'm in the middle. But the doom and gloom isn't happening, but yet the scary monster feeling is still there.
Mm.
Like, don't you go any further. And then you go further. It's like, don't you go any further. And then you go further. And then it starts to kind of dissipate. So I really felt like that was a very big learning lesson for me, was the hardest part is the middle. You think sometimes the hardest part is getting in the car, getting away from your safe space, or whatever the case may be, but it's really about the middle. It's really about what you're going to do if something happens in the middle of the plane ride, of the car ride, in the middle of the long line at the grocery store, right? And so I got to my mom's, made it, got to my mom's, felt great. 2 weeks in my hometown. Guess what? I was driving, I was going places. I mean, I had gone from Kathryn in the room at home, my home, not washing my hair for 14 days because I was scared to get in the shower because the
Yeah.
monster was in the shower, to being at my mom's, and here I am, hometown cheerleader back in town. It was really just lifted for those 2 weeks.
And it's so amazing, right? Because you can see living in the environment that you were living in where you had no space. You literally couldn't breathe, couldn't function, and your system sort of had no choice but to say no more. Like, we can't do this anymore. And giving yourself that nudge of, all right, like, we can stay here, but this is not going to get any better. Or we can go and maybe see what happens. And this is what I talk so much about, right? But on such a much bigger scale, your story of this, you can stay in this ultimate discomfort. You can stay in this place that you truly feel like is safer sometimes to stay in because you're used to it and because you don't know what's going to be on the outside. But then you actually let yourself take a step and you see, oh gosh, it's not so bad. And then you get that freedom and you start to see, oh, wow, like maybe that Kathryn that I think is so far out of reach, that bubbly, carefree travel Kathryn didn't go anywhere. And I just needed to get out of that environment and allow myself to see just what I'm capable of. And so I'm really curious, right? And I'm sure everybody's like on the edge of their seats. you got back, you're living, you say, everything is going so well. And then what? How long does this last?
Well, after I spent those 2 weeks like completely, revived, I decided to flee my situation. And when
Mm.
I say flee my situation, that was exactly what needed to happen. So I want to point out that a lot of times these issues are compounded by our environment. And the hardest part of agoraphobia, and really the panic attack piece, is it keeps us confined to our environment when sometimes the environment is the catalyst.
So good. Couldn't have said that better myself, Kathryn. Yes, yes. It's
So
so true.
it's like being jailed in your mind, but also being jailed, and so I was able to flee my situation. I came back to my hometown. I went
Which
back
was
up
which was how far from where you were? Like, because you drove the 2 hours, but then how far was it back to Ohio?
2 hours. So I lived in northern Ohio, and I was coming to basically to my mom's, who is in the middle of Ohio. So there's about 2 hours. So my sister, my angel, who I would, never have thought that she would actually be the one to pull me out of that situation without even knowing.
Mm.
But I went back up. I fled my situation. She came and got me a second time. Now she knows I'm fleeing my marriage. Now, can you imagine having all of these things happening and you're trying to flee a marriage at the same time? And I don't have any kids. So thankfully, it was really just me getting out of that situation. But I thought to myself, how am I going to take care of myself? I've been living in a bedroom for a year. Like, who do you think you are, Miss Fashion Industry, New York girl? Yeah, you had a good 2 weeks, but then you get
Mm.
all these thoughts creep back in, like, how are you going to take care of yourself? I think, again, there just comes a moment where you think everything lines up, your body, your spirit, your mindset, where it just says, no, we're not doing this anymore. And I kind of feel like I had an out of body experience, like get moving back down here in doing all of that, all of those questions in my mind of how are you going to take care of yourself? You can't even take a shower, um, that when I got out of that environment, that was very much the catalyst for this getting the nails in the coffin being punched in, that I it evaporated. Like I felt that euphoria again. And so from the time I left, all of that evaporated. I got a job. I got a condo initially, a job. Um, I felt so free of my shackles that I was working like 80 hours a week at my new job. I got a job with a local nonprofit, as the events coordinator initially, which interestingly enough, events coordinators have to go places and do things and, you know, stand up straight while they're talking to people. And I still felt anxious most of the time, but it literally, Shannon, it was like a switch flipped. It was like someone had turned the lights off and then the lights got turned back on. And it wasn't any like 8 million exercises that I did. It wasn't trying to pep talk my way out of it. It wasn't anything other than just my body, my mind just lined up one day and said, okay, we're doing this. And so I had a really good year of no issues. I was driving all over. I took a plane trip, went to Florida with my family, went to the beach. Like it was like that time had never happened.
Yeah.
I just didn't I just didn't have it anymore. And so I was thinking in my head, okay, I was now on the other side of a divorce, sadly enough, but I was on the other side of it. And so my body wasn't going through kind of that um, constant threat, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I thought I would never come back. Like I was just fancy, I was bubbly Catherine again. I was like on top of the world. I felt cured. I felt healed. I again just a total euphoria. Total euphoria. I felt like I could take on anything um, at that point. And then driving to work one day about a year and a half later. So now we're getting close to the point where you and I meet up. Is I was driving to work one day. This was a year and a half into my new life. I'm post divorce. I'm doing it. I'm the creative director now at the nonprofit. So I had gotten a promotion, and I was going to conferences and all these things with large scary banquet rooms that they make about 1,500 people sit in. I was doing all of those things and never giving it a second thought. And driving to work one day, I felt the impending doom and gloom, like the driver's license experience.
Yeah.
And guess what? My workplace was only 1.2 miles from my condo. That's not even long enough to like listen to a good song. And I was sweaty. Now, listen, I wasn't on a freeway. I wasn't in a plane when this happened. I was right around the corner from my house. I was sweaty. I was dizzy. My heart pounding out of my chest. I had the jelly leg stuff. And I pulled into the parking lot at my workplace, and I'm like, what the heck? It has been a year and a half since you were here. Why are you back?
Yeah.
Why are you back? I haven't done anything. I did all the things. I haven't thought about you. I haven't had
Mm.
ruminating thoughts. I never ever thought about it again, Shannon, in that year and a half. I never thought about it. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I thought I had outrun the scary monster, but it finally caught up to me, you know? And literally within a 24-hour period, I was back to not leaving the house. 24 hours. And I would try to go into work and I would panic. And this was the hard part, because this is the part where I thought to myself, I can't get it together. Every time I think I got it together, I am so ashamed. The people that know me as bubbly, again, smiley, unlimited
Mm.
energy, Catherine. I was the girl who my boss had to tell at 8 o'clock every night to go home.
Yeah.
He would drive by the office on the weekends and be like, text me busted. I loved my job. I loved the fact that I was not in that coffin anymore. And you know, now I'm agoraphobic Catherine again, afraid to drive, embarrassed. I was embarrassed and I started hiding again.
Mm.
And, I think that, you know, I have been following you for a while. I have been following you for a while. And, there was just a day where I woke up, because now I'm working from home and I'm trying to come up with a bunch of excuses as to why I need to work from home, which are some of the things we went over on our first one on one. Luckily that with not luckily, but during the pandemic, work from home was a little bit more flexible, and we were kind of towards the end of it, but I was still, able to squeak it out and to not go into the office anymore. I had my groceries delivered, and I just woke up one day and I thought, I can't climb back into this dark place again. And because I had one panic attack driving to work. And again, I had been following you for a while and I reached out for a one-on-one, but it took me a while to do that because I was embarrassed to admit it to you, even though you had been through it. I was like, hey, I'm perfectionistic, Kathryn, the cheerleader of the bunch, and I'm embarrassed to admit this. It's not really that bad. It's just kind of like little bits here and there. And, I think that telling my story to you, hey, I can't even back out of my garage kind of thing. Telling my story to you, who's really a stranger, other than the fact that, we all follow you and we get these practical applications of things and all of that. But beyond all of that, just to be able to tell my story and say, listen, this is where I'm at. And I had this great life before, and I had this insert of time where I couldn't leave my bedroom, and I had a really bad marriage. And I got out of that, and I had this paradise of a year and a half, like that previous couple years had never even happened. And now I'm back here again, and it's worse. Like, because I knew what it was before, it's almost like it was worse. It was almost like, even though I only had one panic attack.
Yeah,
That
but
was
you
that was over in a minute and a half.
yeah. But once you've experienced it, right? Like you knew, you had this memory of what it could look like what it could go to. And that's so much of, I think, what the panic feeds off of, and even the agoraphobia. Especially for me, it was always that my brain, that you could have that panic attack again, like the worst one you've ever had. It could go there. And so
Right,
I think for you, it was that realization of like, no, this could still happen. And it could be really bad, like it was, or maybe it could even be worse. And I think you convinced yourself very quickly of that, like, oh no, like I don't got this. And I don't know what this could look like this time. And so it's that, you immediately went into that protective, like, nope,
yeah.
give me all the control. And when we first sat down, it kind of blew my mind because you told me your story, a lot of what you just shared, and I heard you, just like in this conversation, say so many times of this Kathryn you were referencing, like she was so far and gone, and that you would never be that person again. And I was just looking at you, thinking in my head, like you think that this person is so far off, but she's right here looking at me. And so we need to get her. We need to get her back so you can actually see that she's not so far gone. And I remember one of the first things, I don't know if it was the first or second session, but I said, Kathryn, we're going to have you get in the car. Like, we're not going to do this. So I want you to just go out in the garage and get in your car. And that's it. I don't even want you to go anywhere. And like, can you just tell? Because this is like one of my favorites. Can you just tell the story of what that looked like?
Well, being able to tell my story to you, and this would be something that I feel like everybody should hear, is this was one of the things that you told me is find somebody to tell your story to.
Mm,
Find a person that you can be vulnerable with to tell your story to. Now, you were the first person I told my story to, and I had this instant weight off my shoulders. Like, I talk about euphoric, just to say. And but do you know what that did is, you said to me, Shannon, you said, have you admitted it to yourself?
mm,
Have you admitted it to yourself? You
yeah.
can, that's kind of, and I thought, and that stuck with me. And I thought, I am hiding from myself. And listen, that's how we stay stuck, is this scary monster, whatever it is, that's threatening us all the time, that isn't even real. It causes us to hide, and it causes us to hide from ourselves. And I think to myself, I try to be perfect to everybody, but I'm having these issues. And So in fall of last year, we started some sessions and some deep dives. And I think it was on the second or third session, I can't remember, that you said to me, we can't go from A to Z. Like, we need to take this in really, really, really small steps. So I just want you to get into your car in the garage. And if you feel like backing out, back out. But do that 3 times this week. And again, like it it feels so hard, but at the same time, I think, sometimes berate ourselves because it's such a simple thing, but it is hard. And it's okay to say, listen, this is hard. And this is all I have to do this week is back in and out of the garage 3 times. So the first time I got in the car, you know, um, I didn't feel that great. I got in the car. I started to get like the adrenaline bubble up. I got out of the car. I went back in my house. That was all you asked me to do. And I think sometimes we want to go from we want to go so quick because we want it to be over.
Right.
So I hear of people doing like all these exposures 3 times a day, 4 times a day, once a day. Like, what you taught me was do it at, like, push yourself, but don't do it to the point where you're trying to go so quick to get over it. And now we're going back 5 steps. So the second time I got in the car, a couple days later, I backed out of my garage. And that's when I was like, actually, I feel pretty good. And Def Leppard Hysteria is playing on the radio, so I'm gonna listen to it. I just gave away my age. But I was like, I'm gonna see what it feels like to drive, down to the end of my drive of my condo complex, and just, I don't have to go anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just And so I drove down to the end of the driveway, and it was a beautiful blue sky fall day. And I thought, I'm just going to drive around the block. And if at any time I feel weird, I've got all these places I could turn around and be back to the house in less than 30 seconds. No biggie. And so I go to drive around the block, and I'm about halfway around, and I literally start laughing at myself because I feel nothing. It's a beautiful day. I've got my windows down. I've got the radio going, my sunroof up, and I feel nothing. And I'm like, what, like, what the heck, Kathryn? Like, this is what you've been scared of, to not leave the house now for another 6 months. And you even told me, you said, I don't even want you to go towards your work. Like, don't even go that direction, even though it's really close. But don't go that direction. Don't do that now. Whereas a lot of people would say, got to get back here, got to confront it. And so I've got to push myself and push myself. And then that keeps us stuck in that loop. And so I did that. I talked with my mom. I talked with my boss. I came clean, which again, and I just, in some ways, you don't want people to look at you like, to now either treat you with kid gloves or to look at you like, oh, you're one of those people. Look like one of those people. But it was the little steps, and, just taking those first steps. And so I had driven around the block now. I told you about that in our session. And then within 8 weeks, I got this rising up in my spirit of, we're not going here again. We're not doing it. We've beat it once. We're going to do it again. And I know people are probably listening and thinking, that's the part that's lacking, that push to yourself. Yeah. It is so hard when you can't walk out your front door without feeling like the monster's hovering. I get it. But sometimes you just have to take that deep breath and say, no matter how uncomfortable it is, because you told me being comfortable does not equal safety. So just because you have uncomfortable feelings does not mean you're unsafe. And I lived by that. And I decided I was going to move from my condo because that was a great healing place post divorce. But again, it started to feel like that place that was keeping me down. I found a house. I reached out. I said, can I look at this house? This was in December. And, can I look at this house in the morning? And would you not believe it? The next morning I got up and thought of 8 million excuses. I have a flat tire. My stomach hurts. My cousin's brother's dog's fish died. And I like almost text the realtor so many different times, like with these excuses. But there's something in all of us that rises up to say, no, we're going to go forward no matter how hard it is. And so I got in my car. It was 6 miles away. It was 3.5 miles farther than I had driven now in 6 months. And it was tough. I had to go through the scary red light that I had been avoiding for 6 months. And would you believe it wasn't green when I got to it? It was red. And it's like one of those that has like 4 lanes of traffic going this way and 4 lanes of traffic. And, it takes like probably at least 12 hours to get through it. It feels. And I felt the panic rising up as I'm sitting at that red light, and I'm thinking, I'm going to pass out. Like not even going to make it to look at this house because I'm going to pass out. And should I get out of my car and flag somebody down? But then the light turned green and my car started moving. And all of a sudden, the monster, dissipated down. I went to look at the house. I walked in. I knew that that was my house and that this was the next chapter of my journey. And emailed the realtor, said, what do I need to do to get in? And I'm thinking I've got to move now and I've got to do all these things, but I am now sitting in my brand new house. And I have also embarked on a journey of, I have my own company. So I'm not actually working for the nonprofit anymore, but I have my own company with clients. Like I said at the beginning of the hour, just doing creative branding. And do I have uncomfortable days? Absolutely. Am I uncomfortable sitting here? I'm a sweaty mess. But I feel like it's the small steps, trying not to put so much emphasis on getting to A to Z quickly. And also understanding that monster that's trying to get to us all, it convinces us that we can't leave or we can't go here, or we can't do this, or we can't fly on that plane. That monster doesn't exist. Its power dissipates when you ignore it. And yes, we have to take those proactive application steps, like backing in and out of my garage 3 times, but it's really just to prove to the monster that you can't do anything to me. It might feel uncomfortable, but you can't do anything to me. And I think we're all hiding from something that can't do anything to us. We have the choice.
Yeah. Ugh. Talk about how many choices, right, you've had to very consciously make, knowing that they were going to be incredibly hard. And what you said, something rises up, and it's so true. And you have to listen and make the choice. Because I think so often we're waiting for this moment to happen, or we're waiting for the motivation to hit us, or we're waiting, and we'll wait endlessly unless you really take that, listen to it, and go do, like no matter what it looks like and no matter how you feel. And I just think a big part of your journey and this moving forward for you, right, is letting go of the shame, and talk about what this entire episode is going to do for you and a gift that you're giving to so many people. And I'll start crying because I knew when I met you, there's just some people you meet and you're just like, oh, you just have this amazing light about you and you're just so special. And, you coming on to tell your story is going to allow you to work through so much of that shame and also for other people to start to work through their shame, because I think we all have these stories of who I used to be or how everyone used to know me. But really, the work is on an inner level. It doesn't have anything to do with how people see you or what they might think of you. It's a lot more of how you think about you, how you feel about yourself, and what are you going to do to shift that and to let go of the shame and allow yourself to step in to who you are right now with your struggles and letting that be there and putting it out on the table and saying, but hey, just because it's a part of this season right now for me doesn't mean it's always going to be. So I'm going to let myself and let everyone see just what it looks like. And I think everyone listening, right? They better be thinking what I'm thinking. And it's just nobody would ever think, right? Or know that this is stuff that you're struggling with. All I hear is this like really amazing, strong, capable, confident woman who has done some really amazing stuff and is doing some amazing stuff. And I just cannot freaking wait to see all the amazing stuff that you do. And you hit it so much. Like it's a choice and you have to make so many hard choices, but it's so worth it.
Well, we're not victims of this. And I think that's probably the hardest thing that we all get into in our shame and our embarrassment, whether we've admitted it to ourselves or whatever, but we're not victims. And I think that if we kind of walk in the victory before we even get it, it makes a difference. And I know that that sounds hard because there might be somebody listening who can't even walk out their front door to smell that new flower that just bloomed because they're afraid. And what I would say is open the door and smell the fresh air. And then maybe tomorrow step out on your front porch. You'll get to the flower, if it's down at the end of your driveway or 2 hours away.
Yeah.
But we're going to miss so much if we hide in that cloak of shame and embarrassment. And not to mention, can you imagine a bunch of this group and the people listening to this podcast getting together? What a force to be reckoned with. The overcoming spirit, like if the world ended, I would want to be with this group of people because we know how to survive.
Yeah. I we're both crying, but I think this all the time. I'm just like, and I always tell people like our commonality is not anxiety. Like sure, it's part of what's brought us together, but we are just amazing people with so many strengths and just so creative and so smart and so capable. And those are the things that we share and have in common. And there's so many reasons why I'd want to spend my last days with this community. Because too, a lot of us are weird and I love weird.
Exactly. Yes.
So, Kathryn, you've given so much, but if there is, one last thing that you could leave people with, if somebody is at where you were at, where you couldn't even get in the shower, where you felt like you were trapped in this literal coffin, like what would you say to that person?
I would say start small. Don't feel like you have to overcome it in one day or 1 week or 1 month or even a year. Start small. But also, I would say be okay with that vulnerable vulnerable part of yourself. Be okay with that vulnerable part of yourself, because there are things in that vulnerability that are going to actually make you strong enough to get out of that coffin and out of that. There are things in that soft part that are actually going to help you. And also there are people willing to help you. If you find someone my sister was my angel. My mom has, I have, like I said, I've come clean with her. So find somebody to say, I can't get out of this room and I need somebody to just maybe come over, and I want to go smell the flower at the end of my driveway, but I don't feel like I can get there.
Yeah.
So, and, don't give up, because I've now had the scary monster twice. And the second time I started to go down that path and I was like, you again? Like, really? Or no, not going to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. Uh, and it's just so beautiful. It's like everything comes full circle, right? And letting yourself uncover like all of that that's been within you this whole time, like this person who's flourishing and doing amazing things and does not have to, let this monster win. And so I just so appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And you were just amazing. So thank you. Thank you, Kathryn.
You're welcome so much. You have been also my angel, and an angel that showed up on my Instagram feed one day. And so, I think for anybody who is contemplating, getting a little bit extra help, I've either through a one-on-one or group or whomever, any sort of therapy or counseling, I would encourage people to do that, because in my shame and embarrassment, I didn't want to think that I was the type of person who needed that, but it's made all the difference.
Oh, I love that. What, like the most beautiful note to end on. So thank you, Kathryn.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Healthy Push. If you want more, head on over to ahealthypush.com for the show notes and lots more tips, tools, and inspiration that will support your recovery. And if you're hoping for me to cover a certain topic, be sure to join my Instagram community at A Healthy Push and let me know in the comments what you want to hear next.